that right there is a barrel rate, and it belongs to a Texas Ranger who is currently getting on base at a 400% clip. And before I get flamed down in the comments, all of these stats for Alejandro Osuna were pulled at the time of recording this video. Now I want you to look at the slugging percentage for this guy. 288. That is honestly terrible, if I'm being completely honest. That's not a slump for Osuna. That's not a cold April. That is just who this man is on the baseball field right now. 0 barrels, a 288 slug, and a 400 on base percentage. And honestly, I've been staring at this stat line profile for a few days now because it's generally interesting and kind of weird. So today we're gonna figure out if Alejandro Osuna is actually one of the most interesting hitters in baseball, or if this is the most fragile 400 on base percentage in the history of the sport. Probably both, but let's find out. Now, if you're not a Texas Rangers fan, you're probably wondering who in the world is Alejandro Osuna. And he's a 23-year-old left fielder for the Texas Rangers. He signed out of Mexico at 17 years old, and he's actually the younger brother of former big league closer Roberto Osuna. And Alejandro, he made it to the big leagues last year in 2025, and if we're looking at the stats, he wasn't great. A 72 WRC plus, and we all know for any baseball stat that has a plus in it, 100 is league average. And Osuna had a 278 slugging percentage, and he looked like a guy who wasn't quite ready for the major leagues, and that's honestly fair. Here's the thing though, his batting average on balls in play in 2025 was 256, which is about 30 points below league average, meaning balls were finding gloves at an unusual rate for Osuna. He was actually performing better than his suggested numbers, but the league was just kind of catching him when he was down. So he wasn't as bad as he looked. He also wasn't good. Let's be clear about that. But here's the thing, it gets interesting, because before he was struggling in the majors, he was doing this in AA. 18 home runs, a 507 slugging percentage. The power was pretty much there for Osuna. And then he climbed a level, and it got worse. He climbed another level, worse. He got to the majors, it got worse again. Now his barrel rate in 2026 is 0. Literally 0. The power didn't develop. It went backwards, which is alarming, and we're gonna get into why in a minute. But here's the other side of that coin, and this is important before we write him off completely. A guy who hit 18 home runs 2 years ago in the minors, that power doesn't just go away forever. The swing exists somewhere. The pitchers at this level have clearly figured something out, or Osuna has changed his style of approach at the plate. 288 slug is probably not his floor any more than a 400 on base percentage is his ceiling. He is, in 2026, living in the space between those two things, and is generally a weird place for Osuna to be. So, if you don't know much about me, I used to work for the Los Angeles Dodgers. I'm a big nerd for baseball, and I have in the past created my own database where I can ask it pretty much any question I want in baseball history. And I started asking it questions about Osuna, and it kept giving me answers that made me feel insane. Let me show you 3 of them. This is every above average hitter in the StatCast era sorted by barrel rate. A barrel, if you don't know, is basically a perfectly struck ball, the kind that does damage. The bottom of this list is the softest contact hitters who were still somehow useful. We have Billy Burns, Ichiro Suzuki, Nicky Lopez, who is actually on the Rangers right now, guys who slap singles for a living, and then there's Osuna at a 0.0. In 11 years of StatCast data, no above average hitter has ever posted a lower barrel rate. He's not on the list. He's underneath the list. He's holding the list up. The second question I asked for the lowest isolated power numbers, basically how little extra base damage a hitter does. Among guys who were still above average, and to find Osuna's company, you have to travel back in time. Jerry Remy, Dwayne Cooper, don't even know if I pronounced that name right, Ozzie Smith, a man more famous for his backflips than his slugging, Richie Ashburn, who retired in 1962. Osuna's ISO is 0.027. That's lower than all of them. He is doing a thing that the last time it was fashionable, men were playing baseball in wool. And then the third question, I asked who's actually getting on base this year in the 2026 season. And this is the one that broke me. Yordan Alvarez, Mike Trout, Shohei Ohtani, Taylor Ward, and Alejandro Osuna, they're all in the same company around 400 on base, which is quite nuts. That is an elite on base percentage. These are some of the best hitters alive, men who hit baseballs in the different zip codes. And sitting right there with them is a guy with 0% barrel rate and the isolated power of a 1960 shortstop. That should not be possible in today's day and age. Those two things should not be able to exist. So how is he doing it? Well, it turns out he changed something. And once I found what it was, I could not unsee it. So to see what this change was for Osuna, I did what any baseball nerd would do, and that's go to the Holy Grail Baseball Savant. And basically with Baseball Savant, I found a change that most people wouldn't even be looking for, and that was his batting stance. In 2025, Osuna stood 23.7 inches deep in the box. In 2026, he now stands 30.6 inches deep. That's a 7-inch change. That doesn't sound like a lot until you realize in a batter's box 7 inches is an enormous amount. That's not a tweak, it's an actual thing that Osuna probably worked on in the offseason. And here's why that one change matters so much. It rewired 3 completely different things about how he plays. Thing number 1, he started making a lot more contact. His contact rate jumped almost 5 points. His swinging strike rate, the rate he swings and misses entirely, it dropped. But here's the part that makes no sense. Look at the bottom number, his O swing percentage. That's how often he chases pitches outside the strike zone. It went up by 5 points. So he's chasing more and missing less. Those two things are not supposed to happen together. When a hitter starts chasing more, he makes worse contact. That's pretty much how baseball works. However, somehow Ozuna's breaking that rule right now. He expanded the zone he swings at and got better at hitting the stuff in it. The deeper setup didn't make him more disciplined. Let's be honest, he's chasing more than ever. It made him a better bad ball hitter. He is somehow more of a free swinger and more of a contact machine at the same time. He became Vladimir Guerrero Sr. by accident. And thing number 3 to look at, the funny one, when you stand 7 inches deeper in the box, you also put your body in the path of more inside pitches for longer. And Alejandro Osuna has discovered a real talent for getting hit by baseballs. He's been plunked 6 times in 90 plate appearances. Doesn't sound like much. However, if you project it over a full season, it's 31 hit by pitches, which would be, and I checked 4 times because I didn't believe it myself, a top 5 season all time for getting hit by pitches. So basically, Alejandro Osuna would be chasing a man named Ron Hunt, a man who got hit 50 times in 1971. And it was on purpose, as a strategy. A guy who looked at a 95 mile per hour fastball and thought, you know what, I'll take that one off the ribs, it's worth the base. Osuna is on that path. And I say this is with total respect. Getting hit by pitches is a deeply silly way to be good at baseball, and somehow it's working right now for Osuna. But it raises the obvious question. If this much of his game is held together by getting hit and chasing pitches and stuff falling in, is any of this actually real, or are we about to watch the whole thing fall apart? Okay, so let's actually answer the question. Does any of this even matter, or is he just a fun stat line that doesn't really mean anything? This number says it matters. That's his WRC plus, weighted runs created. It's the stat that takes everything a hitter does, adjusts it for the ballpark and the era, and spits out one number where 100 is exactly league average. Osuna right now, like I said at the time of recording, is 113. He is 13% above league average as a hitter, with 0 barrels and a .288 slugging percentage. And the beautiful thing about WRC Plus is that it does not care how you get on base. A walk, a single, a hit by pitch, a 450-foot bomb, it only cares that you didn't make an out. And Osuna is very, very good at not making outs, at least right now. Even if the way he does it, frankly, is really weird and funny. Here's where it stops being funny and starts being a genuine problem, however, for the Texas Rangers front office. Osuna leads the team in on-base percentage by a lot. And all the way down on the bottom, there's Corey Seager, the franchise shortstop, the guy they kind of build everything around. Corey Seager is making $31.5 million this season, and Alejandro Osuna is making roughly the league minimum. Call it the cost of a nice Toyota. And right now, on a per plate appearance basis, the Toyota is out hitting the $31 million. And I don't know what to do with that information. However, I will say I do think Corey Seager will turn it around, but it's a very interesting point just to make. And the Rangers definitely don't really know what to do either with that information right now. Now, there's probably the temptation here to go full Moneyball, to say, see, on-base percentage is the real king. Slugging is overrated. The nerds were right all along. And I actually tested that. I ran the numbers on my own database, every team since 1950, to see whether on-base or slugging is more tied to scoring runs. And honestly, slugging won pretty clearly. Power still moves the needle more than getting on base actually does. So I'm not going to stand here and tell you on base percentage is more important. The data in my own computer would call me a liar. What Moneyball actually figured out in 2002 wasn't that on base was more valuable, it was that it was cheaper. The market was underpaying for it. 20 years later, everybody pays for on base percentage. But a guy who gets on base like a star, through contact and bruises, and almost nothing else, with the power of a folding chair. The markets never had to put a price on that, because it's basically never existed. Which brings us to the part where I went looking for anyone, just anyone in the last 75 years who's done what Osuna is doing right now. So since I'm a complete nerd for baseball, and I have made my own baseball database like a nerd, I asked it one more question. Why not? I said, since 1950, give me every hitter who did basically what Osuna is doing right now. Elite on base percentage, and almost no power, and still an above average hitter overall. Specifically, an on base over 370, a slug under 320, and a WRC plus of over 95. 75 years of baseball data, tens of thousands of player seasons. It gave me only eight seasons in total, in 75 years. And one of these guys is Ron Hunt. Twice, which of course it is. He appears on this list. The patron saint of getting hit by pitches shows up on the no power leaderboard too. That man built an entire hall of very good career out of refusing to make outs and refusing to move out of the way. There's also Pete Rose in 1985 at an age of 44, basically a player manager hanging on by getting on base. There's Gary Pettis, a center fielder who won Gold Gloves and apparently moonlighted as an on-base specialist, and then it just stops. The most recent name on the list, like I said, is Gary Pettis in 1989, 37 years. Nobody has done this in 37 years. The last time a hitter put up this exact profile over a full season, the Berlin Wall was still up. Now, almost every single one of these guys was useful. Look at the WRC plus column, above average across the board, except one, Ron Hunt, 1974, a WRC plus below 100, just under the line, which means Ron Hunt managed to be both the best and the worst player on this list. A man so committed to the bit, he showed up twice and dragged down his own average. Genuinely incredible. But the point stands. Useful players, all of them. The connective tissue of good lineups. The guys who quietly made an offense work. So if Osuna keeps this up over a full season, that's the company he joins. A tiny, weird, 8-deep club of men who figured out how to be good at baseball without doing the main thing you're supposed to do at baseball. Here's what keeps me honest, because as fun as this is, there are 3 big reasons this whole thing should probably come crashing down, and I'd be lying if I left them out. Right now, Osuna's batting average on balls in play is .317. League average in 2026 at the MLB level is .286. So balls are finding grass at an above average rate. Now sometimes that's a skill, but other times it's not. And one worrisome thing is that Osuna's bat speed is 72 miles per hour and a 0% barrel rate. He's hitting the ball softer than almost anyone in baseball. And soft contact over time tends to find gloves. There's no obvious reason his should stay that high. Reason 2, the hit by pitches. And I actually went and checked his minor league record on this, because if he'd always been a guy who's getting plunked, that would tell us it's a real skill. He wasn't in the minor leagues. For 4 years in the minors, his hit by pitch rate was a totally normal 2%. Then it tripled overnight this year. For contrast, this is Derek Dietrich, a guy who generally had this skill. Look at his career. Year after year, 5, 6, 8%, it was always there. That's what a real hit by pitch skill looks like. It shows up early and it stays. And here's Osuna. 4 years of completely normal numbers, and then 2026 out of nowhere. That's not a pattern, that's a spike, and spikes tend to come down. The stance change explains how it's happening, but every player in history who sustained a high hit by pitch rate already had it in their game for years. Osuna doesn't have that track record. The smart bet is that this will come down eventually. In reason 3, we already talked about it. The power has drained at every level he's climbed. The barrels aren't there. The slug isn't there. So if you strip out the inflated batting average on balls in play, and you strip out the hit by pitch spike, what you're left with is something like a 355 on-base guy with no power. And let's be clear about what that actually is. That's not a bench player per se. A left-handed bat with that on-base ability and the contact rate against right-handed pitching, that's a strong side platoon starter, period. That plays every day against righties on a good team. The floor is real here. But, and this is the part that keeps it interesting, remember what I said that at the top, the regression cuts both ways. Yeah, the on-base probably comes down a little bit, but the power, a guy who hit 18 home runs in AA 2 years ago, is not a true talent zero barrel hitter forever, in my opinion. That's almost certainly too low. So the real question isn't will he regress? Everything regresses. The question is which direction each piece moves and where he settles when the dust clears. He might lose a little on base and gain a little power and end up a genuinely solid everyday player. Or the on-base craters, the power never shows, and he's basically a quadruple A player. The range of outcomes here is enormous, and we're gonna find out in real time. So is Alejandro Osuna elite? Here's where I land on this topic, and I'm gonna separate what's real from what's borrowed because both things are true at the same time. The real stuff first. The walk rate is real for Osuna. Like I said, at the time of recording, a 12.2% walk rate, well above league average. And that does not happen on luck. Drawing walks is definitely a skill, and he has it. The contact is real, 89%. He almost never swings and misses. That's an actual, repeatable, elite bat-to-ball talent. The stance change is real as well. We can measure it. 7 inches deeper in the box. Something deliberately changed this offseason, and the numbers downstream of it all moved together. And the WRC plus of 113 is real. At the time of recording, he has generally been an above average major league hitter. That happened. Nobody can take that away from Osuna. However, once we move to the borrowed stuff, the 400 on base percentage is propped up by getting hit by pitches at a rate that probably won't last. And his batting average on balls in play, that's running hot. Some of his on base percentage is rented based off those two things alone. The lease is going to come to an end. So the honest answer to is he elite? No, he isn't. Not like this. Not a 400 on base clip with zero power. That specific version of Osuna is almost certainly temporary. But here's the thing I keep coming back to. The floor underneath all the borrowed stuff is a left-handed hitter who draws walks, almost never really strikes out, and gets on base enough to start against right-handed pitching on a good team. That's a real big leaguer right there. And the ceiling, if even some of the power he showed in the minors comes back while he keeps getting on base like this, that's a genuinely valuable everyday player for the Texas Rangers, who they're only having to pay him league minimum for. He is not the most talented player on the Rangers, let's be clear about that. He's not the most important even. He might not even be in the long-term plans, who really knows, depending on who you ask. But he is without a question the most interesting man on the roster. A zero barrel percentage, plate crowding, walk drawing, baseball absorbing contradiction who is somehow for now out hitting a $31 million shortstop. And nobody's talking about him, which is exactly why I just made this video. So that's Alejandro Osuna in a nutshell. The most fragile, most fascinating 400 on base percentage in baseball right now. Here's what I'd actually watch for the rest of the season. It's two numbers and specifically. The hit by pitches, does that rate hold or does it come back down to earth like history says it probably should? And the second one is his power. Does any of that AA pop ever show up in the big leagues, or is the zero barrel thing just who he is now? Those two numbers pulling in opposite directions are going to decide whether he's a real everyday player or just a fun 2-month stat line we all forget about by August. My honest guess, he settles somewhere in the middle. the on-base percentage comes down, a little power comes back, and he ends up a genuinely useful big leaguer that nobody outside of Texas ever notices, which is somehow the least interesting outcome for the most interesting player on the team. Baseball tends to do that for you. Anyway, I built an entire baseball database to figure this out, so there's going to be a lot more of these. If you want to watch me ask a computer increasingly unhinged questions about Texas Rangers role players, subscribe. It's free and it deeply validates me.